And good morning again, everyone. So this is lesson number 3 of our level 10. And let's take a look at what we're gonna be doing. So, well, first of all, we're gonna be discussing the 4 people that you listened to on this audio that I assigned last week about heroes and their characteristics and their character traits, okay? In order to use those adjectives that we were studying last week, and of course, other things that you learned. Then we're gonna start a new topic related to Unit 1B, discussing 30-day challenges, where we're gonna be reading a text and then talking about the grammar that is shown there, which is question formation, different kinds of questions that you have already learned, but we're gonna review some of them, like for example, subject questions or indirect questions, especially to remind you of some aspects related to, for example, word order, prepositions going at the end, etc. Okay, so those are the points we have for today. And let's start immediately with our first activity. This activity, guys, is related to that audio that you were working with. I put the adjectives over here as a way of reminding you so that you can feel free to use them during your conversation. Of course, you can use other words, right, that are not there, like determined, courageous, etc. And we have 10 questions about these people. At the end, there are a couple of questions for you directly. So before we go to the breakout rooms, I would like to know if anybody has a question about what to do.
It's clear.
Okay.
This is clear.
Perfect. So guys, let's see. We're gonna be working in pairs. And then if somebody arrives a little bit late and they don't have a partner, I'll put it in one of your groups, okay? All right, let's see. All right, thank you guys for waiting. So we're gonna join the rooms and I'll be coming to listen to you. So see you there in a minute. Please join. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so let's see. Nicolas, in your group, can you tell us who would be Melanie's and Fernanda's heroes? Do you remember?
If I remember, the hero of Fernanda is his mom. And in the case of Melanie, too, her mom, sorry.
Okay, awesome. And what about yours?
About my hero, my heroes are my parents, I think, because they are very important for me. And they're very lovely persons, and that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you to teach.
Well, guys, does anybody have a question about these people or about any words from the vocabulary before we move on to a new topic?
About eccentric. What was eccentric?
Eccentric is when somebody is very different from everyone else. They might be thought of as a little bit extravagant or maybe out of conventions. So, for example, for many people, singers like Lady Gaga or Bowie, right? They were very eccentric because they look very different. The way they the way they do
Sure.
their hair.
Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
The meaning of vain.
Vain is a person who is very maybe in love with their own appearance, and they always want to look beautiful.
Okay.
And
Okay. Okay.
Mhm. Anything else, Klaus?
Okay, so eccentric is when you are like, you have a different opinions or you look different around everyone, but in a bad way or in a good way.
Well, I wouldn't say in a bad way, even though it depends on the tone of the person who says that, right? Because if it comes from a person who's very conservative and they say, oh, you know, Paz is very eccentric. At the end of the day, if they are very conservative, anything would be unusual for them. So I wouldn't say eccentric is a negative characteristic. It is going to depend on who says it, right? And how they say it, what tone they give it. Like, oh, you know, this person is so eccentric. I never know what to say when I see them coming, or they are gonna say something completely unexpected.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, class, good job. I hope that you liked the audio. I thought it was a really interesting set of young people, right, of different people. Well, maybe John Lennon was not young, but the other three people that they talked about were. And by the way, guys, Kailash Satyarthi was a man, not a woman, okay? So sorry about that mistake there. Now, we're going to be starting this topic about 30-day challenges. So before we discuss the questions, let's read the text. So it says, have you ever started a new hobby but given up after only a couple of weeks? Or started a course and stopped after the first few lessons? Most of us have tried to learn something new, but very few of us ever really get any good at it. It's just too difficult to continue doing something new. But now there's some good news. Did you know that if you can keep up your new hobby for just 30 days, you have a much better chance of succeeding? And you may learn something new about yourself too. So, guys, as I mentioned earlier, this is a topic for Unit 1B. There are some parts of the unit that you're going to do for homework. And we will be doing a reading in a few minutes. But first, let's discuss these questions. So, let's see. Melanie, have you ever tried something new and succeeded at making it a habit?
I'm trying to keep succeeding on the going to the gym. I'm pretty lazy and I kind of hate doing exercise. So I entered the gym in January and I'm still going.
Awesome.
It's difficult, but I'm still going. So I would count that as a succeed.
As a success. Excellent. Good to hear. It's a very healthy habit.
Yes.
Diego, what about you? Same question, by the way.
Okay, I try to to do some exercise too. For example, first I walk around the residential, something like that. Now I use the spinning bikes.
I am feeling terrible now, guys. Because I have a lot of exercise equipment at home, including a spinning bike. And I don't use them anymore. It's terrible. I was doing great last year and this year, not at all.
And it's because you don't have time, or?
Yes, mainly because I don't have time. I have 2 jobs and I started a new master's program and I am taking 4 classes. But I think we can always make time for exercise, even if it is 15 minutes a day, because we need it, right? And so I need to force myself back to doing something.
Yeah, it's just like maintaining a schedule, and yeah.
Exactly. So well, guys, you are inspiring me. Thank you for that, because I know you are all very busy also. Maybe any other habits, guys, or hobbies that you have started, which are different from exercise, and you want to share?
Well, in my case, I wanted to be more organized because I have some courses at the university and I have to work. So I wanted to have my English course again. So I made a calendar and to organize my schedule. And I tried not to sleep late, to have more energy in the morning. And sometimes it is difficult, but it is like a challenge for me. So yes.
Absolutely. So, well, that is a great habit, Diana, because right now, I don't know about you guys, but I always go to sleep late, either doing things or because I can't sleep. So Diana, what is your recommendation to be able to go to sleep earlier?
Well, the cell phone it has to be really far to the bedroom or something like that, because sometimes the problem is the cell phone, or do some things at night. So I think it's better doing the things in the afternoon, or not so late in the night.
Not so late at night.
Yeah, I agree with Diana. I think when you look at the cell phone when you're going to sleep, it's not going to work. When you, I don't know, enter to TikTok or Instagram, you're going to stay there and you are not going to sleep. You're going to stay with your cell phone because it's an addiction. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree with you, Dan.
Yes, that's true.
Absolutely right. Yes, I think that's one of my main problems. Okay, thank you very much for sharing those tips. So guys, we are going to go to your textbooks. Remember that the ones who don't have the book yet, I had shared with you the PDF for Unit 1. So what we're gonna work with now, you already have it, okay? So we're gonna go to the book on pages 12 and 13. Let me share that screen with you. Yes. Okay, so you're gonna be doing, guys, the listening and vocabulary sections of this unit for homework, because right now we're gonna start with the reading section. Okay, and here we have 3 different people. We have Farah, we have Mona, and on page 13 we can find Steve. As you can see in the reading, we have answers to an interview, but we don't know what the questions were. So I am going to give you some time to individually read the answers and choose the questions to complete the interviews from part C on page 13, please. So I'll give you about 10 minutes for this individual task. If anybody has a question, please feel free to ask. So here we go.
Track 1.12. What made you decide to become vegetarian, Farah?
Well, for quite a long time now, I've been trying to eat less meat, partly for health reasons. I think vegetables are better for you.
But didn't you ever think of being vegetarian before?
Yes, but I always thought I'd miss meat too much. But the idea of being a vegetarian for 30 days was really good, because I could give it a try and then see how I feel.
And how do you feel? Are you finding it difficult?
No, I feel really good. Actually, I don't miss meat at all, so I think I'll easily manage the 30 days and I might try carrying on longer. I certainly think I'm a bit healthier than I used to be.
Mona, why did you decide to draw something every day?
Well, I've never been very good at drawing, but I've always thought I'd like to start drawing things around me. It's one of those things that you think about doing, but you never get round to.
What have you drawn pictures of so far?
All kinds of things. At the start, I drew objects around me at home. Then I went out in my lunch break and started drawing things outdoors. Like yesterday, I drew a duck in the park. That was really difficult.
So do you feel it has been worthwhile?
Oh yes, definitely. I'm still not very good at drawing, but it's been lots of fun and it's very relaxing.
Steve, what language did you decide to learn?
Well, I thought I'd choose a language that isn't too different from English, so I decided to try Italian.
Isn't it difficult to keep going with it?
Yes, it is. I've had to be very strict with myself. I'm using a book with a CD, so I usually try to cover one lesson a night.
And who do you practice with? Or are you just working alone?
Well, there's an Italian restaurant just round the corner, and I'm friends with the owner, so I go there and I chat to him. That's one reason I chose Italian.
And do you think you'll carry on after the 30 days?
Maybe, or I might try a different language every month. I'm thinking of trying Japanese next.
Okay. So guys, did you get all the questions? Or does anybody have a question about them? Question about the questions?
No, teacher.
Done. Okay. Perfect. So now that we saw the questions in context, let's analyze the grammar in them, please. All right, so we have different kinds of questions in English, of course. And we have the most typical ones that are the ones that you learned first, right? The ones where we need an auxiliary, which could be either the verb itself, like when we use the verb be, either in the present or the past. Or we have other kinds of auxiliaries, such as have or had in the past perfect, or did, or any other modal auxiliaries, such as should, must, would, etc. And we already know that the typical word order would be, well, either auxiliary subject object, right? If we start a question with an auxiliary because it is a yes/no question, or a WH question where we start with the WH word followed by the auxiliary and then subject and object. So let me use this pointer, that is more fun. Okay, so the other kind of question that we find in these examples is the kind that we call subject questions. Why? Because we are going to use WH words such as who, what, and which, right? And depending on the combination or what we are talking about, they are the subject, so we don't have an auxiliary, right? This is the reason why when we don't know the subject we're talking about, we are gonna use who And right after that, we conjugate the verb straightforward to the past, the future, or the present, because we wouldn't know what auxiliary to use as we don't know who the subject is. So we say, who spoke to you, right? This also happens with questions such as, what happened next, right? In case you've ever wondered why is it that we don't use an auxiliary in this question, right? And the same thing with which, for example. Now, the third kind of questions that we can find in this list is those that end in a preposition, right? So we already know, class, that if we have a preposition in a question, it's typically going to be placed at the end of it. As when we ask, who were you talking to, right? Or what were you talking about? Where are you from? Etc. So we never start a question in English with a preposition as we would in Spanish. In the past, people used to use, for example, to whom do I owe the pleasure, right? Things like those that were really formal, but that is out of use at the moment. So if you ever find something like that, where a question or a sentence starts with a preposition, most likely it'll be because you're reading a story or a book where the scenario is more formal, old-fashioned English, or a more polite English. And finally, the type number 4, to ask an opinion, we often ask questions starting with a phrase like, do you think? These kind of questions we also call indirect questions or embedded questions. So to talk more about these kind of questions, I'm gonna go to the presentation, guys, where I inserted a couple of images taken from your textbooks on page 134. So if you have the textbook and you wanna go there to follow and, you know, highlight or take notes, go ahead. And if you don't have the book yet, you will find the grammar here. So let's see. There are a couple of extra tips to remember. For example, well, I've already mentioned the fact that we are gonna place prepositions at the end, but I have a question for you. For instance, the most typical thing we find or we do is, okay, thank you, Nicolas, for letting me know. The most typical thing we're gonna find is the auxiliary, right, in a normal affirmative form. But have you ever wondered in what context we are gonna ask a negative question, such as, why isn't my computer working? What is the connotation of negative questions in English?
Sorry, how was the question?
When do we ask a negative question, Paz? What is the connotation?
Maybe when we have a doubt about something.
Okay, let me give you an example. Melanie, who is your favorite band?
I don't know. I think I don't have one.
You don't
But
have one?
I don't think so.
Okay. So if Melanie says, I don't have a favorite band, and I ask, don't you have one? What is the emotion behind that question?
To confirm something, maybe?
Because it's surprising, right? Most supposedly. It's just an example, right? I don't have a favorite band either, but I am surprised because most people would have one, right? So I ask a negative question, class, especially when the answer or what the person said is surprising to me, right? Like, don't you have a favorite band? Everybody does, right? Or another example down here. Haven't they finished yet? They've taken 2 hours. Okay. So asking a negative question usually has a different connotation than it would when we ask questions in Spanish, right? Which, by the way, is also a very cultural difference, right? I think that mainly only in Costa Rica do people ask negative questions. Right? Like, no quiero un cafecito. So this is not typical in other places. So I thought it would be a good idea to clarify that because it's a matter of semantics. Okay. Is that clear, class?
Yes.
So it's only used when the answer is kind of surprising.
Mainly, yes. Or when things are going differently from what you expected, right? That's why we have this,
Okay.
this, right? Like, let's say that your computer always works well, but today it isn't, and it's basically new. So that is frustrating and at the same time unexpected for you. So you would be like, why isn't my computer working, right? It's new. So yes.
Thank you.
Of course. So, okay, there is also a tip here that we're gonna go through because it's very important. You might have noticed this already and you may already do it naturally. But just in case you've ever wondered, it's very common to ask short versions of questions when we already have the context of what we are talking about. For example, I'm going to a party tonight. Who with? Right? Instead of asking the complete question, who are you going with? Which is, of course, also correct, but it's more natural to just ask the short version, who with? Or can I borrow your phone? What for? Okay, or just why? So, especially with WH questions, of course. I'm going out. Where to? Okay, so those are 3 that I can think of. Who, what, and where. Okay. Let's move on to indirect questions. Because, by the way, all of these are direct questions. So why do we say that a question is indirect, guys?
To sound polite.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what you said?
We use indirect questions to sound polite.
To be more polite, absolutely, thank you. Yes, we want to be more polite. Maybe we don't know the person, so it's a little bit rude to just go to someone we don't know and be like, hi, where's the bank? Right? Well, of course, there are contexts where those things happen, right? Especially in many places in the US where Americans are a lot more direct than, say, for instance, Canadian or British people. However, we always want to learn the polite ways, don't we? So an indirect question, class, is a question that is going to start with a phrase like the ones that we have in bold here. For example, do you know why? Can you tell me if? Do you happen to know? Could you tell me? Do you know? Would you mind telling me? And more, okay? So that bit is gonna have the question, the typical question structure, right? Where we are gonna have, of course, an auxiliary followed by a subject, plus verb, sometimes object, as we can see here, sometimes not, as we can see on the first one. And after that, depending on the kind of question that we are asking, whether it is WH or yes, no, we might have a different word coming up. For example, if we are asking a WH question, right? Of course, we need to keep that WH question somewhere in the indirect question in order to maintain the meaning, right? So, why did she become famous? Do you know why she became famous? So notice that we keep the word. But tell me, what happened to the rest of the question? What has changed if we compare it to the original question?
Because if you don't put a WH word, it would
Uh-huh.
sound like an confirmation.
Okay.
And it is done using the auxiliary verb. Instead of that, the sentence has a past verb, became.
Excellent, that's correct. So if it is an indirect question, we're gonna get rid of the auxiliary. And as she said, we are gonna change the verb to its conjugated version, right? So this would become the past form of became, right? Sorry, of became. We would not insert the auxiliary anymore. And one more thing, notice that we are gonna use sentence word order. Right? What I mean is that we can find subject, verb, and object after the WH word, right? Do you know why she became famous? So basically, class, what happens is that this indirect question stops being the question and it becomes the object of the sentence, right? Or the complement of the sentence. So you know that in complements, we always have sentence word order. And that's why we are respecting that rule. Okay? So the same happens if we have auxiliary, yes, no questions. But there is just a little difference. So when we have yes, no questions, well, of course, we usually start with whatever auxiliary we need, depending on the tense, right? But please notice how it changed. Do you like foreign phones? Can you tell me if you like foreign phones? So, again, what happened to the auxiliary?
Yes, the auxiliary disappeared.
Exactly. Right? What do we use instead of the auxiliary in the question then?
Can.
If.
If, right? We are gonna use if instead. Because we need to let the person know that the question we are asking is a yes, no question. So how do we know if we don't have an auxiliary? Well, we are always gonna use if. Okay. In this case, the original question was with do. So auxiliary words such as do, did, and does, these three disappear because they don't have any meaning, right? They don't have any meaning, but to tell us, excuse me, but to tell us the tense and the subject in present or past simple. So they disappear. We are gonna see other examples later in case that we might have other auxiliaries that have meaning and therefore cannot disappear. But for now, let's see how, and we're going to substitute it in the context. And as you can see in the rest of the object, we respect the same rule as we did with the WH question. So we're also going to have sentence word order. You like foreign films, subject, verb, object. Okay. I'm going to stop in case there are questions so far. Okay, so class. When we have indirect questions, they don't always look like questions. They can also be sentences, okay? For example, followed by this or introduced by these phrases. I'm not sure, I know, I don't know, I wonder, I can't remember, right? And let's see the examples. Is this answer correct? And the indirect form would start with, I'm not sure if this answer is correct. So we follow the same rules as above. It's just that we are not starting with a question. And of course, if you are writing, you wouldn't write the question mark at the end. Where have they been? I wonder where they have been or they've been. So this is a good example of a yes, no question with an auxiliary that doesn't disappear, because if it is the verb be, remember that it doesn't just work as an auxiliary, but also as the verb. So we need it to carry the meaning of the sentence. So we can find it here, right? Subject is answer, verb is, and object. Another example where we have a different auxiliary that is not any of these three, do, did, or does, is the other sentence, the other question. Where have they been? So we need to keep have because it's part of the verb's conjugation. I wonder where they've been. Okay, so we have it there next to the verb, the subject, sorry. And finally, class, I'm going to explain the tip below that has nothing to do with indirect questions. So let's just make this a little more orderly. And it's related to questions with which. So sometimes people wonder what the difference between using which or what is. And basically we use which plus noun when there is a limited number of options. And what plus noun when there are many possibilities. For example, we can have our meeting at 10, 12:15, or 14:30. Which time would you prefer? Because our limited amount of possibilities is these three options, right? Or if I say, well, I have tea, coffee, or hot cocoa, which one would you like, right? But if we have a wide array of possibilities, we're gonna use what? I'm free all day. What time do you want to meet? Right? So there is not a limitation there. Okay. Again, I'm gonna stop another minute before we go to the practice in case somebody has a question. Oh, I see something in the chat. Okay, thank you, Danny. I read your message. All right. So class, let's practice then. I'm sure that if there are any kind of queries, they'll come up as you start working on it. So, if we go to the next slide, we are going to find a link to the first written practice, okay? So please class, in order to access this, you need to go to this hyperlink that says click here to go to written practice, click on it, and it'll open this PDF on a separate tab. Okay. So you are going to be working on this exercise in small groups or pairs. And you need to do two things. First of all, unscramble the questions, please, for them to make sense. And then decide if this kind of question you have there is direct or indirect. Okay. Okay, and notice that you have the last part of the question under this bit, just in case. So please, guys, when you're working on the breakout rooms, one of you share your screen, and if you have the chance to write on the screen, I will be able to see what you're doing when I come in your group and help you or make any corrections if necessary. Okay? Does anybody have a question about instructions?
No, teacher.
Okay, so let me open the breakout rooms again. Okay, we had said that the first one was, okay. The first one is, could you tell me if I'm in the right place? Right, so it's indirect. As you can see that we have one of those indirect phrases or questions in this case. Could you tell me if, right? And please, class, remember that after that, we're gonna have sentence word order, right? Okay, number 2. Where have you studied English is a direct question, right? As we can see, it starts with where. How did you find about it? How did you find out about this class? Well, this is without the last bit. Also because it started with how. So let's notice that characteristic. In number 5, it starts with what? In number 6, with who? Number 7, with where? Number 9, with what time? Number 10, with who? So in all of these examples, notice that we are following the typical word order of a question where we have WH word followed by an auxiliary, have, did, are, was, did. After that, we have a subject, you, etc. The verb, studied, find out, hoping. When the verb is the verb be, it doesn't always have another one. Will we finish? So we follow the typical word order, and that makes the sentence, the question, a direct one. But if it is indirect, remember that we're gonna have an introduction like, can you tell me if? Can I ask whether? May I ask, do you know? And I wonder, right? And after that, we're gonna have sentence word order. Well, if we have a WH word, that would be part of the phrase, let's say. By the way, class, whether, the word whether is a synonym of if. Some of you already knew it, but just in case somebody doesn't know, they are used the same way, okay? And remember, after if, whether, or the WH word, we are gonna have sentence word order, subject plus verb plus object. Subject plus verb plus object. Subject, verb, object, etc. Okay? I'm gonna write that reminder up here and then I'll send you this, okay? This is the bit, guys, that is usually harder for people to remember. So we're gonna practice a little bit more today before we go. Plus verb, plus object. So, please, guys, go ahead to this slide that says time to practice, speaking practice. So if you click on it, you're gonna find a short game where you need to complete the puzzle by choosing the correct answer. Okay, so you have, do you know where? And you have 3 options. So you click on the one that is correct. If you click on one that doesn't work, you're gonna get this. And if you click on the one that is correct, you will see the next piece of the puzzle show and the second question will pop up. Okay. And in this practice, well, besides remembering the word order, you also will learn some other phrases like, have you any idea? Do you happen to know, etc., which we are going to be using next class. Does anybody have a question about the activity?
No, teacher.
Okay, so we are gonna go to breakout rooms with a different person, and give me just a second to rearrange the groups. Okay, so please join the rooms again. Class, sorry, I know that a couple of groups hadn't finished and I apologize. Please finish individually because I don't wanna I don't wanna do what I used to do that was exceed our time. I wanna respect your time. So we're gonna stop here. Please do this extra practice that I inserted here between those 2 things that we did today. Between this one and the last one that you just did. Okay, in this practice, you need to use you need to complete the situations with the correct question using the words in parentheses. Some of the questions or phrases are direct, some others are indirect. We will check this at the beginning of our next class. And starting on this slide, you can see our asynchronous activities. As usual, there's some vocabulary and listening from the book. That's why you have the instructions on what pages and exercises you need to do. The grammar and listening and speaking practice will be explained on the coming slides because they are not from the book. So you have the answers there, and then you have these additional exercises also related to kinds of questions. You can check your answers for this one. And the last one is very important. It's one of those activities that you do, that you prepare so that you can speak about in class. Okay? You need to think about a hobby or activity that you would like to learn and stick with in 30 days. So individually, guys, you're gonna look for a YouTube video or a podcast or any other kind of, social media resource to find tips for you to be able to learn that hobby that you chose in 30 days, okay? Please take some notes of those tips that you find in the video or the podcast, because we are gonna share those ideas next class. Here I gave you some suggestions, but of course, if you have other interests, be my guest and choose whatever you want, okay? And later today, I want you to please send a text on the chat and say what the activity you chose is, for me to be able to organize the breakout rooms next class according to different activities. Okay?
Okay, teacher, thank you.
Great, guys. Have a lovely day and see you on Thursday.
Thank you, teacher.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Take care.